Hi everyone! So I'm really excited today because we'll be comparing PR122, which is one of my favorite pigments, Quinacridone Magenta. I actually have 6 colors to show you today that are made with PR122. These two on the bottom aren't, and I'll tell you why in a bit. The first one we have is Sennelier Helios Purple. This is their old tube and they called theirs Quinacridone Purple, but it's still PR122. There we go. They currently call it Helios Purple now, so just be aware that they've made that change a long time now. I had this tube for like over 10 years, but it still works fine. And this one is White Nights Quinacridone Rose. Usually Quinacridone roses are made with PV19, but this is made with PR122, so just be aware that if you want a PR122 in the White Nights range, they call theirs Quin Rose. And then we have Holbein's Quinacridone Magenta. Nothing out of the ordinary there. And winsor&newton's also calls theirs Quinacridone Magenta. I have that in my palette here. And Rembrandt's Quin Rose Magenta. I don't know why they chose to call it Quin Rose Magenta. Not sure, but yeah, also PR122. And then we have Van Gogh's Rose. I actually have a story about this, and I'll tell you about that once we get to it, but it's made with PR122 as well. Single pigment, and we shall see how that compares to the rest. Oops. And then we have these two that are not made with PR122. This one is Van Gogh's Permanent Red Violet, made with PV19 here. And this one would basically be the student grade option that I would recommend for anyone who wants to try out the hue of PR122 to see how well they like it in mixes or in their palette. I really recommend this one. I've used this one myself, like a whole pan of it, and yeah, it's definitely one where I felt like having this in my pan could completely replace my regular PR122, so we'll see how that compares to everything else as well. It won't be exactly the same, but personally I feel like it could replace for the spot in my palette. And the last one here is Rembrandt's Benzimidazolone Violet. Here we go. And this one is made with PV32. Again, it's not made with PR122, but this is more of a personal comparison for me because I like these, you know, more blue reds, you know, blue leaning reds. So I just wanted to compare how this one compares to everything else. I mean, I know it's going to be more blue, but yeah, I thought it would benefit you guys if you want to see it as well. Okay, let's get started, shall we? So this first one is Sennelier's. I'm just mixing up the pigment here. Ooh, beautiful. Lovely, transparent, vibrant. Okay, trying to pack on more pigment there. Lovely color. So vibrant. When I actually first used Sennelier's, I felt like at the time I hadn't discovered PV19 Quin Roses and whatnot, and it was like the color that I loved. Next we have here White Nights. Oh. Is White Nights a bit duller? That's very interesting. Slightly duller, but not too much. Just ever so slightly duller. Well, I guess when it goes on, when it went on, it looked the slightest bit duller, but right now, as it's like slowly drying up, I guess, it's looking pretty vibrant. Not bad. All right, next we have Holbein's Quinacridone Magenta. I'm just gonna use this straight out of the tube because I don't have it in a pan. Is that enough? We shall see. I think it should be enough. Oh, vibrant. Very vibrant. I'm not seeing much difference in all of these guys. Lovely. Okay, next up we have Winsor & Newton's. Let me clean the top a little bit. Okay, back to swatching. Oh, this one, wow, Winsor & Newton's seems like it's swatching out similarly to White Nights, where it felt a bit slightly duller, but not too much. Yeah. Okay, so interestingly enough, Sennelier's and Holbein's went on pretty similarly, and White Nights and Winsor & Newton's felt like a little bit duller than these two as it went on. But again, we'll have to see once it dries if it keeps its vibrancy or its dullness or not. We shall see. Okay, so far I'm not seeing much of a difference here as it went on paper. But yeah, let's move on to the bottom row. Oh my, what did I drop? All right, we have Rembrandt's Quin Rose Magenta. This one seems a little bit, I wouldn't say opaque, but not as, it doesn't seem as transparent as the ones above. It's giving me feelings like how Lucas is with their watercolor. Not entirely opaque or like chalky like Lucas, but I'm not feeling like, I'm sorry about the interruption. Let's move on to Van Gogh's Rose. So with this one, in their color chart, if you've been looking for a cheaper alternative to PR122, you're going to see that Van Gogh has this color called Rose. Their code number is 357, and it says single pigment PR122. You're going to see in their whole color chart that some of their other colors does say that they have white, pigment white included, like PW6 or whatever. And those are clearly pastel. But when I tried this, I was very, very disappointed. I mean, at first when I saw it, I was like, oh, Van Gogh has a single pigment PR122 in their range, what? I could just buy that and I'd be happy. However, it's so not what, it's not these PR122s. So I'm gonna swatch it out for you and I'll tell you why that is. Have it here. You can already see that it doesn't get as dark in mass tone. Like, I mean, look, that's just a pink color. See? I'm not sure if you could see on screen, but it's definitely not transparent. What is going on? And it's definitely like, oh, what is happening? I'm not sure if you could see on screen, like, is it coming through the camera? But here. I'm not sure if it's showing very well. But see, this one still resembles Quinacridone Magenta, PR122, but look at Van Gogh's. It looks like it has white added into it, and I'll tell you why. So I wrote to Royal Talents to ask them about this, and basically what they said is, yes, it is single pigment PR122, but they use an opaque filler, so that can sort of behave similarly to adding white to a mixture, and that is why you get that color. It's like Aurora pink. Like, you know, the Disney Princess Aurora, Sleeping Beauty, it's that pink. I mean, I'm gonna show you guys this. Okay, I can't find my sketchbook right now, but I'm going to add a picture here somewhere on the screen where I actually sketched out Aurora, Sleeping Beauty, and I actually used this color because I felt like it was so perfect and appropriate for that character. And that's what I think of when I see this color. It's not PR122 at all. It's just it's a pastel pink. Not like a super pastel pink, like I'd have to add more white to that, but you cannot get this to try out Quinacridone Magenta. Just, yeah, don't get this. Now that we're done with all the PR122s, I wanted to quickly show you this Van Gogh's Permanent Red Violet, which is, where did it go? This one. I have this in here. Van Gogh Permanent Red Violet PV19, and this was actually filled up to the brim, and look at it. I've basically used it all up, and then I didn't top it up because I went back to other PR122s, but I really loved it. I'll show you guys. Do you see that? That is so similar. And I wanted to show you this one because Van Gogh's version looks very, this specific color looks very similar to your artist grade PR122. And I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's just a tiny bit more blue. But if, like, I mean, it's side by side with all of these right now, and even I can't tell. However, I believe Rembrandt's version of Permanent Red Violet is much darker than this. However, Van Gogh's version, I believe they add brighteners as well and whatnot to keep it, like, you know, vibrant. That's why the color comes out like this. So if you're interested in the PR122 hue, but you don't, you know, you can't afford artist grade or something like that, then I think Van Gogh's Permanent Red Violet would make a very good substitute or alternative. And now we have Benzimidazolone Violet. I did swatch this out when I first got it, but ever since then I haven't really used it yet just because, I don't know. We shall see how it compares. It just doesn't, it didn't really hit the right spot for me. As you can see, it sort of paints out similarly in mass tone, but once, look at that. once you dilute it, it seems to be more blue. But I mean, like, if that's what you like, go for it. But personally, for me, I think it's a bit too blue, and it's not as vibrant as your typical PR122, but it's very, very similar. I believe Daniel Smith has this pigment, PV32, called Bordeaux, like, you know, that red wine color. I don't drink wine myself, so I'm not sure how well it represents red wine, or like Bordeaux in general. So the top row is already starting to dry, and I'll wait for the bottom row to completely finish drying, and then we'll come back and take a look at the differences together. All right, I'm back. The swatches have all completely dried. Okay, so it has this one. This one is the Van Gogh Permanent Red Violet. When I came back after it completely dried, the Van Gogh Permanent Red Violet didn't, like, as you can see here, it looks a bit too dark, and I wanted to show you that it's very much similar to PR122. So I swatched it out again here where you could see more of it diluted, and I'll get to that in a bit. So just letting you know that this sheet is Van Gogh's. Okay, shall I go this way? I'll go this way. All right, I'm sorry about that, but I'd rather do it this way so you could see all of them at once instead of, you know, going the right way around, and then, yeah, you can't see everything all on the screen. So, as I mentioned earlier, White Nights and Winsor & Newton were a bit duller, or I'd say, is it duller? I think I would have to say it's not that it's duller, but it's cooler than Holbein and Sennelier's. So if you have any of these brands at home, just letting you know that Sennelier's and Holbein's seem to be very similar in hue, whereas White Nights and Winsor & Newton is a little bit more cooler, so that means it leans more towards blue. And as for Rembrandt's, it seems to be very much like the Sennelier and Holbein's. However, as I previously mentioned, it seems to be that little bit less transparent than these. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's chalky like how most Lucas paints are, but it is not as transparent as these other brands here. As for Van Gogh Rose, I'm not sure if you could tell on screen here, but hopefully you could see in the scans later that it definitely does have more white in it. Again, I feel like if I had more information from watching YouTube videos, then I wouldn't have bought this one, but it seems to not show on screen very well. But it's basically PR122 with some white added. Like I said, Royal Talon says they use an opaque filler, that's why it seems that way. But if you really wanted to try PR122, don't get the Van Gogh Rose. I recommend the Permanent Red Violet from the Van Gogh range because it behaves much more like the typical PR122 in that in mass tone, it's transparent, it's high tinting, there's no opaque factor like the Rose, and when diluted, it gives you this like cool red color. So I'm just showing you here that it's very similar to all the other artist grade versions. So I think if you're interested in PR122, but you can only get Van Gogh, or you prefer to start with a cheaper option, then check this one out. Don't get the Rose. But again, if you like the pink of the Rose, then sure, buy that. But just letting you know that it is nothing like your typical Quinacridone Magenta PR122. As for Rembrandt's Benzimidazolone Violet made with PV32, when we swatched it on, it really felt similar to all of the other Quinacridone Magentas. But look at it when it's dried. It's much duller, it's much bluer. That's very interesting. But what's more interesting to me is that the PV32 in mass tone, compared to these, it's much more red. So it's like, it's warm in mass tone. But as it's diluted here, over here, it's much more cooler than all of these other ones. I'd like to note that all these blooms and backwashes happening, I think that's just my paper, because I don't really get too many blooms and problems with Quinacridone Magenta in general. So I think with that, it's just my paper's fault. Overall, generally speaking, Quinacridone Magenta isn't a pigment that I'm very picky about, because the differences in the hue isn't all that different, unlike some other pigments, you know, like how PB36, as we've seen earlier, has a wide range, but PR122, not looking at these two, right? It's all pretty much the same. I mean, let's not look at Van Gogh Rose either, because that's just, that's like a pastel, right? Yeah, but so far, all the brands of PR122, it's basically the same for me. I use them interchangeably and I don't mind. They're all good. So I feel like you can't go wrong if you stick to an artist grade brand. Make sure that it's made with PR122 and not like a different pigment. Then I think you'll be fine. And for those of you who already have PR122 in one brand or another, I really don't think there's a need to try other brands, because you're just going to end up with lots of similar looking paints that won't really do you any good. If I were to go back in time and tell myself, I just say that, you know, just pick one tube, pick one brand, and you don't need to buy more unless you finish it. And then I could change brands. Personally, I think it's not really worth your money to buy multiple tubes of PR122. Keep your money for other pigments that have larger variations. I do wonder if any of you are picky with your PR122s, and if so, which brand do you use and for what reason? Because personally for me, as long as it's not opaque like the Van Gogh Rose, I could pretty much use any of the brands on here. So if you're interested to look at the scans, do stay for that. But that's all I have to say for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to drink lots of water and stay hydrated. But I'm not feeling like... Hello ค่ะ ได้ค่ะ